Doesn't that music just pump you up? Yes. Yes, that's good walkout music. Okay, so hey, good morning. My name is Josh. I'm the lead pastor here at Inland Hills Church. We're jumping into a new series today. Before we do that, just want to say a quick thing about something that's coming up next Sunday. So our mission here at Inland Hills Church is to inspire people to find life by following Jesus. So for those of you who are already following Jesus, we want you to recognize that there's still more life to be found in him. We want to see you grow in your faith. For those of you who are wrestling with the possibility of faith, the possibility of putting your trust in Jesus, we want to continuously be thinking about how we can continue to create environments and safe spaces for you to explore the possibility of faith in Jesus. Which is why, shortly after Easter, we're going to be launching something here at Inland Hills Church called Alpha. I want us to watch a video real fast about a couple people and their experiences within Alpha. And then after that, I'm just going to tell you about what you can do if you want to know more. Here is the video.
My name's Melissa McNor, and I live in Chicago. I used to work with Lindsay, who goes to Soul City, and every day she was my desk buddy, and I sat next to her, and every day she was always rushing out to get out to go do whatever she had to do.
She was always running. She was always frantic, which is funny because that's how she would describe me. Which is exactly how she described me.
There was one day where she was in a huge rush.
There was one day that I was frantically probably trying to get out of work because I would go straight to Alpha from work, and I was clearing out my bag.
And she slammed this little red book down.
I grabbed my red book and very gently placed it on the desk, and Melissa immediately grabbed it.
I had snatched it off her desk, and I asked her, I was like, what is this book? And she was like, oh, it's Alpha, it's through my church, like, keep it, you can look at it. So I looked at it, shoved it in my backpack. I actually don't think I ever really looked at it.
I believe she still has it to this day. I'm not sure she ever read it, but I know that she kept it, and it was just a great way for me to kind of open that door and to tell her about Alpha. And it was as simple as me just placing the book on my desk.
That was probably, I don't know, last spring or so, and then unfortunately I was let go due to COVID, and so Lindsay knew this.
When I heard that that was going to happen, I was beyond devastated. It broke my heart. Melissa was such a joy to work with, and she was such a hard worker. So to see how she handled it, she took it really hard.
She knew I was going through a really rough time, and she was calling me and checking in on me, and she was like, you know what, you should check out this Alpha course. It was what I was telling you about. And at the time, I had gone through several rounds of interviews where I was making it to final rounds and not getting, the job. And so I was really in, I'll say, a really dark place.
So I continued to call and see how she was. And that was when I finally, for the last time, not because it was the last time invited, but that's when I finally decided to again invite Melissa to Alpha, because I knew that going through a job loss during the global pandemic, the only way you can get through something like that is with your faith and with God. And I knew that Melissa needed that in that moment.
Maybe this is what I need. Maybe I'll give it a try. I didn't grow up religious. I know nothing about religion, or I knew nothing at the time. And so I was like, maybe I just need to find God. Maybe this is what I need. And so she sent me the link, and I signed up for Alpha and ended up joining the course.
And summer 2020, during a global pandemic virtually, Melissa joined her first Alpha, and I got to be her leader. And it was the most amazing thing to see her show up. I know she was very hesitant at first, but she showed up. And once she started showing up, she started asking questions.
I had so many questions, so much to the point where, my friend Lindsay, I would text her and be like, these are all the questions I have, but don't tell anyone I'm asking them because I'm super embarrassed and I feel stupid. So she ended up putting them in an Excel spreadsheet and opened it up to the group for everyone to choose a question each week so she could slowly get my questions answered anonymously.
She got so nervous to ask questions because she didn't know if it was a safe space. It's intimidating to come into a space where you have to ask these deep questions.
But by the end of Alpha, you know, I'd really grown some strong friendships through the group. I was no longer nervous. I asked all the stupid questions I thought I had, whether they were dumb or not.
Melissa, when she joined summer of 2020 virtually, from the couch, her boyfriend would continuously ask questions and answer questions or get intrigued. So finally, the next session, he officially joined. And then from there, Melissa invited one of her best friends.
I had no idea that like a simple invitation, being invited to Alpha, would really make such a difference in my life and open up so many different doors that I didn't know existed. And finding this great sense of community through Soul City, through Alpha, has been amazing. It's something that I didn't even really know I was missing.
Melissa's now inviting people, so it's just amazing to see how one red book led to Melissa coming, led to Grayson coming, led to Melissa's best friend coming, and it's just expanding. So to see that invitation continue to go out through Melissa is so impactful and just speaks to Alpha and speaks to her as she's grown through her spiritual journey.
Alpha is a safe place for people to explore the possibility of faith in Jesus. It's a safe place for them to come and ask any question that they want, to throw out any doubt that they have, and to actually be able to talk through that. We're really excited about launching it. We're going to be launching it shortly after Easter. Now, for those of you who are maybe wrestling with the possibility of faith in God, I want to invite you to a preview that's happening next Sunday. It's happening at 12:30 p.m., and you can come and check it out if you'd like to see kind of what it might be like and how we would facilitate a conversation. But for those of you who've been longtime followers of Jesus, you need to know that Alpha wasn't necessarily tailored for you, but we want you to be able to use it as a tool. Many of you I know, because I talk to you in the lobby every week, many of you I know have family or friends or coworkers who you would love to share Jesus with, but you're not sure like what to do, and you're not sure that they'll even come like on a Sunday morning for a kind of service. Alpha is a tool for you. You can invite people to Alpha and you can decide to come along with them, not because you necessarily are at a place where you're totally exploring faith. Maybe you've already decided what you think about Jesus, but because you want to come along someone as they're exploring it and be a support for them or invite them to be part of it, even if you're not able to be there. You ever told a friend that a party is going to be really awesome or a restaurant is going to be just amazing, the service is just mwah, and you invite them to it, and then like that's the one day that it really sucks? Like, you know, like, oh, come on, it'll be great. And then it's like, oh, dang, well, today it was, right? Like, we don't want that to be the case for you. This is why we're doing the preview. So even if you know Jesus, longtime follower of Jesus, like we want you to have the confidence that if you invite someone to Alpha or if you join someone in Alpha, it's not gonna suck. So next Sunday at 12:30 p.m., we're having an Alpha preview. So it's right after our 11 o'clock service. It includes lunch. If you have kids, it includes childcare. If you don't have kids, it still includes childcare. It'd just be weird if you dropped a stranger off. So you can come be a part of it. You just need to sign up inlandhills.com/events. Alpha, when it launches shortly after Easter, will also include childcare. And we just love for you to come and see what it's like, even if it's not something you're planning on personally doing. Because church, we want to constantly be creating environments where we can invite our friends, our loved ones who are far from God and are willing to explore Jesus, and Alpha is a place for them, and I want you to have the confidence that it can be a place that you invite them as well. So that's next Sunday, 12:30 p.m. Would love for you to join us. Please sign up, because we got to know, since there's a meal involved, there's food, we got to know how many people are going to be there. inlandhills.com/events. Okay, today is the first week of our new series called Rabbi Jesus. When I was in my early 20s, I almost walked away from Christianity. I really wrestled with it for several years. And what I discovered is that the version of Christianity that I'd been handed as a child, which was a version suited for a child because that's what children can understand, that version of Christianity just simply wasn't strong enough to withstand the weight of my adult questions. So I had to rethink what faith even looked like. And what eventually brought me back to Christianity was that I fell in my early to mid-20s, I just fell absolutely head over heels in love with the person of Jesus. The more I learned about him, what he taught, how he lived, how he led other people, the more that he became three-dimensional for me, the more lifelike he became to me, like the more I realized like this is the spot for me. Like I want to spend my life pursuing this Jesus. First of all, because I just believed he was a great, wise teacher. And then as I became convinced that he knew the best way to live, I also became convinced that he was my Lord. That was kind of my progression. What we want to do over these next several weeks is to have Jesus come really alive for you. We're going to be reading and looking at stories that maybe you've heard before or read before, or have heard told before. But instead of just reading them, I want you to feel them. I want something to click inside of you so that it's more vibrant and life-giving than it's ever been before for you, some of these stories. When I first had my son Jack, right? So he was a newborn, because that's how they come out. And it was a new dad, and I was excited. I felt like for the first several years of his young life, anytime somebody saw me with him, if I was in a park or if I was at a restaurant or whatever, if it was a person who had already had kids and their kids were like older and grown up and out of the house, these would be total strangers, people that didn't even know me. They would come up to me and say something like, "Cherish these moments, young man, because they grow up so fast." And the first time somebody said that to me, I was like, "Oh, that's really kind." The 50th time somebody said that to me, it was like, "Mind your own business. I'm busy cherishing some moments right now," right? Like, it's just weird that people would just come up like at Panera and be like, "Cherish these moments, young man." They'd go by and say, okay. So he's 3 years old. We're at a park. And he's got his whole tiny little hand around my finger, and we're walking through the park together, and he's, still kind of stumbling a little bit, still trying to get a feel for it. And this woman walks up to me, this older woman out of nowhere, and she just says, "Cherish these moments, young man." And in my mind, I'm thinking, I know, they go by so fast. But instead, she said, "He'll never love you like this again." Oh, you jerk. Well, I didn't need that kind of a visceral statement, right? And then she went on to say, "He may love you more than this, but he'll never love you exactly like this again." It's a different kind of love that a 3-year-old has, than a 9-year-old has, than a 20-year-old has, and he'll never love you like this again. It was a riff on a thing that I'd heard before, but for the first time, it clicked. And I've been busy cherishing a lot of moments ever since. I want something to click for you over the next several weeks. So we're going kind of low tech. We're going more experiential. When you came in today, you should have had on your seat a card chosen at random just for you. You got a part to play in this thing today. So hold the card, remember who you are, and I'll let you know when it's time. In the meantime, we're going to read 2 stories. It's a couplet. They go together. They're in the book of Luke. This first one is about a blind man. This story about the blind man is in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We're going to look at Luke's version. We're going to be in Luke chapter 18. If you have a Bible or a device that you can pull up a Bible on, you might want to do that. We don't even have the verse. We're going super low tech today. We don't have the verses on the screen today. We're going to have to use paper. For those of you who are younger, paper is like trees. We killed them and then we sliced them and then now, okay, are you with me? Okay, just pull out your iPhone. It's fine. All right, so Luke chapter 18, we're going to start in verse 35. I'm just going to read these couple stories real quick. They're very short, and then we're going to spend the rest of our time today unpacking them, and you're going to help me do it. Luke 18, starting with verse number 35. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. And they told him, "Jesus of Nazareth is passing by." He called out, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." And those who led the way rebuked him, told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped, and he ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord, I want to see," he replied. Jesus said to him, "Receive your sight, your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they also praised God. It's a nice story. Story number 2. Chapter 19, verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, and a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. And when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once, and he welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this, and they began to mutter, "He's gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up. And he said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here now I give of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." Okay, so 2 stories. For lots of you, not all of you, but for lots of you, you've heard these before, or you've read these before. Some of you even sang songs about some of these stories before. I'm hoping to unpack them today in a way that is helpful. So we're just going to start again in chapter 18, and we're going to pull it apart as we walk through it. Chapter 18, verse number 35. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. Okay, a few things. Jericho is a town. It's not a huge city at this point. It's rather small, but it ends up being like a resort kind of town. It's a place where a lot of people in this region go, and they winter there. It's warmer there, right? So they go and they have like vacation homes essentially set up. So there's people who are very wealthy who are in the city of Jericho, and then there's lots of people who serve the people who are very wealthy in the city of Jericho, and you have a very, very thin middle class. So it's mostly upper class and then a whole bunch of people lower class. That's kind of the divide. There's a man who's begging on the side of the road. Now, we have beggars today, people who are homeless and are asking for people to help them out. We see this in places. And in society, generally in society, we don't think very highly a lot of times of people who are in that socioeconomic status. And oftentimes you'll hear people, just really ride them and say like, oh, those people just need to get a job. They need to work harder, or they're probably just addicted. They're probably, have alcohol problems or whatever. In the meantime, people who need some help from society have become increasingly creative in the ways that they are asking for that help. In fact, I recreated a few signs. These are actual signs that I've seen in Los Angeles as we've driven down that I just thought were brilliant and creative, and so I thought I would share them with you today. I saw one that said this: "My ex-wife had a better lawyer," right? So, okay, all right. I mean, that's pretty creative. This was one of my favorites as well. I like this. "Father killed by ninjas, need money for karate lessons," right? I mean, that's asking for some assistance. And then this is probably one of my absolute favorites. "Lost my weed in a series of small fires." You get it? Yeah, it's funny. Okay, we're moving on. Okay, so people have been increasingly creative in the way that they've asked for assistance, even at the same time that our society has increasingly shunned those asking for assistance, right? And for many of us, we've gotten compassion fatigue. We have a hard time feeling empathy or sympathy for someone whose lot is worse than ours. That is not the case in the first century, or at least not to the degree that it is here. In the first century, a beggar on the side of the road, someone who was handicapped, blind since birth, not able to work. This is someone who society at large, right, Jewish society, felt that they were in some ways doing a helpful and good thing for society by begging. Because part of what it meant to be a good and faithful Jew was to give a portion of your income away to those who were poor. And so if you see someone begging, like, they are in some ways helping you to meet your obligations to God to be a good Jew. Like, okay, I can give you some money, and then actually that's good for you, but it's good for me too, because in giving you money, I'm actually giving God money, and you're helping me be obedient to God. In fact, when they would beg, they wouldn't say, "Please give me some money," or "I need to buy karate lessons," or my ex-wife had a better lawyer, right? They would say instead, "Give to God. Give to God." The message being like, if you give to me, it's like you're giving to God, because if you give to me, you're fulfilling a part of what your obligation is to be a good and faithful Jew, a follower of the one true God, Yahweh. So give to God. And then if someone did give, oftentimes the beggar would stand up and they would actually compliment the person who gave. "This man here is one of the most generous men in all of Jericho. May you be blessed. May your troubles be few and your coffee be strong." Like that, just may you be blessed for all of your life. Like, you might give more money away if every time you gave to somebody, they stood up and just talked for a couple of minutes about how awesome you are, right? Like they had figured out a system that worked for them and that worked for the people who were giving to them, and that's what beggars did. So while they weren't considered to be as lowly as our culture and our society often treat people who are in need like that, they were still at the bottom of the socioeconomic class. They were at the bottom of the rung. So Jesus is approaching the city of Jericho, and word about his approach is starting to spread. This man has been teaching things that people have never heard before. This man has been healing people of afflictions. So imagine being a part of the city of Jericho. Imagine being like part of the lower class, but you're not the beggar class. You're just the bottom end of the spectrum. And imagine that you had some type of affliction, some kind of disease that you hadn't been able to find a remedy for, and it was bothering you on a regular basis. And then you hear that Jesus, the great healer that you've heard stories about, is approaching the city. Or perhaps maybe you've just heard that this man is speaking in ways about God that no one has spoken before, and you just want to learn what this man has to say. So whatever reason you might have for wanting to see Jesus, you hear that he's approaching, and you rush, and you actually leave the city to go and greet him on the road as he's on his way in. Oftentimes, celebrity type people or politicians, local politicians, would be greeted outside of the city as a sign of honor and respect to welcome them and to usher them in. So these people are leaving the city of Jericho as Jesus is approaching to come and greet him and to escort him back into the city in hopes maybe that he'll stay and heal a number of us or teach a number of us. And as you're going out to greet Jesus, imagine that you come across this blind beggar who is in your way, and he is being so loud. And that's what we read here, actually. So there's a blind beggar along the roadside, and as the crowd goes by, they say, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. So he's heard the stories of Jesus as well, and he called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. This is a messianic title, a title that they expected that the one who would come, who would overthrow Rome, who would bring about a new kingdom, like they thought that this is a title they would use him. So he's using that title of Jesus. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So they're like you cannot talk right now. You cannot do that. My son Jack, 9 years old now, and we were in Texas last week visiting some family, and we're hanging out. We're in the car with some of my wife Emily's, with her brother Brandon. And so this is Jack's uncle. And Brandon's telling us a story, and Jack's sitting next to him. And my 9-year-old looks at Brandon as he's mid-story and just says, hey, can you pause that for a second? And then he starts to talk. And I was like, you mean can he pause himself? Yeah. Like, can he stop talking? Yeah, that's what I meant. Jack, that was very rude. He was like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be rude. I just say that to people sometimes when there's like being really boring or something. That's not better, man, right? Oh. So this blind beggar is trying to, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And the crowd is telling him to be quiet. So pretend that you are a desperate person. How many of you have this card? You're a desperate person in the crowd, right? A number of you. All right. So I'm going to say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And I want you to say, shh. All right, you're going to shout shh at the same time. You've probably never shouted shh before, but you're going to do it in just a minute, okay? So I'm going to say it. You're going to shush me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. That was creepier than I expected it to be. Like I'm in a den of snakes. All right. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Oh, it doesn't feel good to be at the bottom end. You're at the bottom end of society. You know that you're at the bottom end of society, that everybody else who sees you, you can't see them, but you know that they see you. And you know that they have no tolerance for you to possibly cut the line or for you to be seen as more important than them or for you to be more worthy of the attention of Jesus than they are. And so they try to hush you up. You've spent your whole life being overlooked and hushed up. Not today. He shouts out all the more, Jesus, Son of David. Jesus, Son of David. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus looks at this unimportant man and he speaks to him. Verse 40, Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus kind of subtly rebukes the crowd by inviting this unimportant man over. The crowd's been telling him to hush. Jesus goes against their will, asks the man to come. And then this blind man, who would have had to stumble over to him to find him, he looks at this blind man and says, what do you want me to do for you? And it almost seems like an offensive question. What do you think I want, Jesus? Some Nike jogging sandals so these old flip-flops will stop falling off? No, I'm blind. I want to see. That you would assume that like it's a weird, almost sarcastic question. Maybe it's even an offensive question, but here's what you have to know. This man's been blind probably his entire life. Whatever trade his father practiced that he would normally apprentice in, he is unable to apprentice in. In other words, he has spent his entire life living off of the goodwill, the charity of the people around him. He does not know how to make a living doing anything else. So when Jesus is asking him, what do you want me to do for you? It's not that Jesus doesn't understand that the man is blind. It's that Jesus is basically saying, like, if I heal you, your whole life is going to change now. You don't get to make a living going forward in the way that you have in the past. So you have to decide if you're willing to live a completely different way than you have. And if that's the case, then I can offer you healing. what do you want me to do for you? He's resolute. He's thought about it. Lord, I want to see, he replied. Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. He offers him healing. He offers him grace in the moment. And Jesus' healing, his grace is free. But it's going to ultimately cost this man everything because he doesn't get to keep living like he did before. So there's a free gift, but it's really just the beginning of a journey that's going to continue to go forward for the rest of his life. That's what he's getting himself into. And then the question is, what will the crowd do with this? Right? Because Jesus kind of subtly rebuked them by inviting this blind beggar over. Sometimes people subtly rebuke, and sometimes they very overtly rebuke. I remember a few years ago, I was riding in the car. My wife was driving. My mother-in-law was in the front seat. My mother-in-law's name is Debbie. We have a great relationship. So this is not my mother-in-law's horrible story. We really do have a great relationship. So I'm sitting in the back seat. Emily's driving. My wife, Emily, she's riding the bumper of the car in front of her because she wants them to go faster. And I know if you've met her, you probably think, no, not sweet little Emily. You haven't seen her behind the wheel. So she's just riding the bumper, and then a green light goes red, and it kind of happens rapidly. And so the car punches their brakes, and Emily has to brake pretty hard. And Debbie says, Emily, you always follow people too close. You follow them too close. And I start laughing from the back seat because she's right. Emily does always follow people too close. And then like a beat of silence in the car happens, and then Debbie looks at me and she says, do you want to know what you do wrong when you drive? Well, I didn't realize we were having that kind of day, Debbie. So then she critiqued my driving. She gave me some very explicit, specific criticism. And she was right about me too. So there's overt criticism, and then there's subtle criticism, and Jesus kind of subtly criticizes the crowd by going against their will. So the question after he heals this blind beggar is, how will the crowd react? Will they be okay with the fact that he actually did something different than what they originally hoped for, or will they turn against Jesus? And what we read here, after he says that your faith has healed you, immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. And when all the people saw it, they also praised God. So if you're a desperate person near the blind man, if that's the card that you set on this morning and you just shushed me earlier, I want you to right now just break out in spontaneous applause. All right, cool. About 50 of you with the card, 7 of you meant it. Great. Okay, so we're going to keep reading. That's one story. Here's the other. Jesus apparently isn't going to stop in Jericho that night. So as you can imagine, it's very disappointing to the crowd that just went out to celebrate his arrival and to usher him into the city. 19 verse 1, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. In other words, he's not planning on stopping. Then we read this in verse 2. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. All right, just a little note on tax collectors. And if you've been at Inland Hills Church for a few months, you may have heard me say something like this before, but it's helpful to know that Jewish people hated tax collectors because the Romans, they didn't feel like should be over them, and yet they were. And what Jewish people really hated in the first century was a Jewish person who decided to be a tax collector on behalf of the Roman Empire. So not only do we now have a tax collector, but it's a Jewish person. They've basically become a traitor to their people. They've sided with the Roman Empire in order to make themselves very wealthy at the expense of the rest of us. Tax collectors often made their money by overcharging individuals more than they actually owed the empire and pocketing the difference. And the tax code was confusing, and you couldn't Google search to see if you were paying the right amount of tax. And so you just had to trust the tax collector that they were being honest with you. And by the way, spoiler alert, the tax collector was not being honest with you. People hated tax collectors. Zacchaeus is not just a Jewish tax collector in the city of Jericho. He's the Jewish chief tax collector in the city of Jericho. So at the opening of this story, Zacchaeus wants to see Jesus, but he's got 2 problems. First of all, he's short and can't see over the crowd. Secondly, he's hated. You know, if you were short and couldn't see over the crowd, but the crowd generally liked you, they'd probably let you in and give you a space so that you could see. But he's not just short, he is hated by this group of people. So what is he going to do? He really wants to see Jesus. He's heard of this guy, heard about the teachings, heard about the miracles, wants to lay eyes on him himself, but he's short and he's hated. And what is he going to do? So he devises a plan. So he ran ahead, it says in verse 4, and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. So Jesus is coming into the city when he reaches the blind man. He's passing through the city. And so Zacchaeus is going to go to the other side of the city as Jesus is walking through, exiting it, to a sycamore tree just right out of the city so that he can see him as he departs. And he does two weird things there for a man of high stature in the first century in a Middle Eastern culture. He runs, which you just didn't do. And then secondly, he climbs a tree, which you super didn't do. In fact, John F. Kennedy had an ambassador to Egypt, John Bow, who was spotted by his next door neighbor while he was in Cairo in a tree in his backyard, hanging up lights for a garden party that the embassy was going to host that night. And it was so embarrassing for a man of stature to be in their own tree that when some of the Jewish officials found out, they made him retell the story at parties several times because they thought it was so embarrassing for him. Like grown men who are of some stature do not climb trees, sir. Please tell everybody about the time you climbed the tree, right? It was just kind of an embarrassing type of story. That continues to be the case to this day in Middle Eastern culture. You do not run, you do not climb trees if you're a grown man, especially if you're a grown man of high wealth, high class, high stature. But Zacchaeus has two problems, and the only way to solve them, he believes, is to climb up into a tree. So Zacchaeus goes into a sycamore fig tree. Now, sycamore fig trees were great for climbing because they had a lot of branches, the leaves were really thick, and the trees were, the limbs were fairly close to the ground. So even someone who was a bit short would be able to climb up into the tree and look down, and then people wouldn't be able to spot them as they were up in the tree. So this is my friend Cameron. I just want you to know, Zacchaeus was short. Cameron's 7'2". I don't want you to think less of Cameron, okay? So Cameron, can you give us a little wave real fast, all right? So he's in the tree, he's hiding out. And then the next passage we read is that Jesus is walking by and he speaks to Zacchaeus. How did he speak to Zacchaeus? How did he know that Zacchaeus was in the tree? Well, most scholars believe that probably the reason that he knew that Zacchaeus was up in the tree is because somebody had spotted him. And the people had started to speak to him themselves. Can you imagine what it would be like to see someone who you consider your enemy, right? It's someone who you feel like has wronged you time and time again, and they always have the upper hand. They have more power than you do. And then finally, one day, the tables turn, and they have the upper hand. Like can you imagine this is nice. This is delicious. This is juicy, right? Like maybe you have a boss who you're always kind of doing the work and they're always taking credit for it. And that's always the case. And they always have the upper hand. And then one day the tables turn, you have the upper hand. You find yourself in that situation. How would that feel? Or a coworker maybe? Or maybe someone has recently told you to pause what you're saying so that they can talk over you. And you're like, oh, the tables have turned now, haven't they, right? Or maybe Shanae from the latest season of The Bachelor, right? Shanae, you ate all of Elizabeth's shrimp, right? That was not a kind thing to do. So imagine if Elizabeth saw you in a tree, Shanae. Yeah, how would you feel about that? You know you were wrong there. All right, so let's say that you have somebody who you know is usually in the upper hand, but they have done wrong, and now you finally have the upper hand. What might you say? How might you treat them? So some of you have a card that says, angry person in the midst of the crowd. Can you please raise your hand if that's you? Angry person in the midst of the crowd. Okay, you've been wronged by this Zacchaeus, and you see him in a tree. And some of you have a card that says disconnected person in the midst of a crowd. Can you raise your hand if that's you? Yep. So you're not so angry, but a bunch of people around you are, and you want to be cool. So you're all going to do the same thing, okay? So if you're disconnected or if you're angry, I want you to look up at our screen. We've got some phrases for you that you can yell at Zacchaeus in the tree. I want you to pick out one of the phrases, just one, okay? Pick out anyone that you like that seems enjoyable to you. And then when I tell you to go, I want you to turn back here at our Zacchaeus, and I just want you to yell that phrase 3 or 4 times in a row. You ready? Can we do this? All right, so if you're disconnected or if you're angry, go. Hey, Cameron has feelings too. Cameron, you doing okay back there? How'd that feel? It hurt a little bit. Okay, I'm sorry, man. Okay, all right, so now there are other people in the crowd as well. People who maybe they didn't like Zacchaeus, but they were in the same socioeconomic class as Zacchaeus. So imagine being fairly wealthy, right? There were a number of people who were in the city of Jericho. And you see this group of people who are so angry at Zacchaeus, and you've seen populist uprisings before. You recognize that while the crowd may be currently directing their anger at Zacchaeus, in an instant, they could turn and be angry at everybody within Zacchaeus' socioeconomic strata. So what if you're a wealthy person and the crowd is starting to get really angry? You start to feel like, oh my goodness, this could go south really fast. How many of you got cards that said you're a wealthy person? I want you to stand up right where you are. Just stand right where you are. Just stand. I'm not going to ask you for money. Just stand right where you are. Okay, and as those people who had the wealthy card, you're going to continue standing, and the rest of you who picked out a phrase and yelled it, I'm going to tell you to go, and I want you to yell it 3 or 4 more times, okay? Ready? Go. Okay, all right, you can stop. All right, those of you standing, how'd that feel? Was that good? No. So you're like, I feel really uncomfortable. Some of you like, you're just hams and you're like, this is the moment I've always been waiting for. Like, everyone look at me, this is fantastic, all right? Yeah. All right, you guys can have a seat. So we find them at the sycamore tree. Everybody's yelling at Zacchaeus. Jesus walks up, and the people have expectations, right? On one side of the city, Jesus took the side of the oppressed. And he said, those of you who are unfortunate, right? Those of you who have been wronged, those of you who have had to live your entire life in desperation, I'm with you. I see you. You're important to me. And so Jesus goes from the side of the city that has a man who's oppressed, and he walks through the city, and he goes to the other side, and he meets an oppressor, a man who has wronged those who have less than him, a man who has become wealthy because of wronging those who have less than him. And the people there, right, they are for Jesus. They are with him. Like, we saw you do the other thing. We weren't real comfortable with the blind man at first, but like the table's turning, and we were like, oh, okay, this is good. We're for this. You healed him. That's amazing. We've seen this guy out here begging every day. That's a miracle. We are with you, Jesus. And then on the other side of town, you see this oppressor. What do you hope for? What do you expect him to do? It's like, well, oh man, like, I hope Jesus is here. He's the great teacher, the great healer. He's going to let him have it, right? And they would have probably loved for Jesus to step up to that tree and to look up at Zacchaeus, and they say something like, Zacchaeus, for years you have profited off the sweat, the blood, and the tears of these people. You have taken what is not rightfully yours, and you have done damage to them and made yourself wealthy because of it. I command you, Zacchaeus, to come down and to go to Jerusalem and to sacrifice there and to repent to God for your sins and to become ceremonially clean. And only then should you come back to Jericho and apologize to every person here who you have wronged. And then, Zacchaeus, maybe then I will give you some of my time. If he had said something like that, the crowd would have cheered. The crowd would have roared. He would have just continued to build goodwill with them, like everybody would have been on Jesus' side. And that's not what he does. Instead, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up to him and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. And all the people saw this and began to mutter, he is gone to be the guest of a sinner. They are shocked at what Jesus is doing, and they feel betrayed. That's not how this was supposed to go. Jesus, if you're really the Son of David, you're supposed to be on our side, not the side of the oppressor. What Jesus does for Zacchaeus is he takes the anger and the rage and the fury of the crowd, and he takes it off of Zacchaeus and transfers it to himself. They're not mad at Zacchaeus in this moment. They're shocked, appalled, and furious at Jesus, which is actually exactly what Jesus would do later for everyone when he went to a cross and he took all the sin and pain and brokenness of each and every one of us. Sin, pain, and brokenness that we frankly weren't strong enough to carry the weight of, the burden of by ourselves. And he transferred it to himself. What we see here in the story of Zacchaeus is a foreshadowing of what's going to come for everyone. And it changes something in Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus stood up and he said to the Lord, "Lord, look, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." The crowd is with Jesus when he is rescuing the oppressed. The crowd turns against Jesus when he offers grace to the oppressor. The crowd really wanted a populist, angry speech that represented the people. What Jesus does instead is he offers salvation to a terribly broken man who desperately needs it. Yeah. See, sometimes we're the oppressed, and sometimes we're the oppressor. Sometimes we are wronged, and sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we are hurt, damaged by unjust systems. Sometimes we benefit at the expense of others from those same unjust systems. And what we can recognize from these 2 stories, purposely placed back to back in Luke's gospel, is that Jesus stands with us when we are oppressed, and Jesus offers us salvation when we are the oppressor. Jesus offers his gifts to everyone who will receive them. I don't know what you need today. But when you came in, you sat in a chair that had one of these 4 cards. You were basically handed a card. You didn't really choose it, which is a lot like how it would have been in the first century, by the way. Like, you were handed a certain socioeconomic status and family, and there wasn't a lot of upward mobility. So if you were born into a poor family, you would probably die as part of a poor family. And if you were born into great wealth, you would probably die in great wealth. You didn't get to choose that. It was just luck of the draw. You were just handed whatever you were handed. But Jesus gave people the opportunity to trade in whatever they were handed for something really different. And so in just a moment, I want to extend to you the opportunity to trade in whatever you were handed this morning for something really different. Now, if you're on eChurch, obviously you can't fully participate with what we are about to do in the room, but if you'll hang out for a second, I'm going to come to you with something very specific for you in just a few minutes. For the rest of us, I want to offer you this morning the opportunity to trade in the card that you were handed when you came in for a card that you actually need now. Jesus offers different things as we read through the gospel to different people depending on what their needs are at any time. And so this morning, you can trade in your card for something that says either one of 4 things: grace, peace, rest, or healing. Grace, peace, rest, or healing. Some of us need grace. We've made mistakes. And grace is just God's ability to inject himself into areas of our lives that we aren't capable of fixing ourselves. Some of us need the grace of God in our lives, the grace that Jesus brought to both of these men. Now, neither of these men, by the way, was this the end of their story. Rather, it was a brand new beginning. The blind man doesn't get to keep living like he did before because he had an encounter with Jesus, and now his life trajectory is different. Zacchaeus doesn't get to go back to collecting money in the way that he did before and wronging people. He now has to change and transform and live his life in a different way. This wasn't the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new one for them. And for many of us, we need a fresh start. We need the grace of God to inject itself in an area of our lives where we can't fix it ourselves. For some of us, we need rest. We're just exhausted, just worn out, so tired. And some of us need to come this morning to the Jesus whose yoke is easy and burden is light. For some of us, we need the peace of God. In fact, the word peace seems like a completely impossible concept in a life full of stress and anxiety. And the idea that we could come to God and receive something that resembles peace in our hearts and our minds, it just feels almost too good to be true. And some of you this morning need the peace of Jesus, the peace that surpasses understanding. What does that mean? I don't understand it. It surpasses it. Some of us need healing. It's possible we need healing from something physical. And I can't promise you, by the way, that if you come forward this morning with a physical ailment that you will definitely be healed. I've seen people healed in miraculous ways by God. I've also seen faithful, good, godly people pray for healing, and it didn't happen. Not in this moment anyway, but what Jesus offers us is a healing that might take place now, but for sure it'll happen in the echo of eternity. Healing for our bodies, healing for our souls. That's the promise of following after Jesus. And for some of us, we may have a physical ailment or an emotional ailment or spiritual ailment. We just need to be healed. So in just a moment, I'm going to ask us all to stand together. And in four corners of the room, here down front and in the back, there are two tables as well. We have cards, and on them are written the words grace and rest and peace and healing. And if you need something from Jesus this morning, whether you're the oppressed or the oppressor, whether you've been wronged or you're just wrong, I want to invite you to take whatever card you were handed this morning and come trade it in for whatever it is that you need from Jesus. And to believe that he loves you and cares for you enough that wherever you are, he's with you. He's for you. He is beckoning you forward to come to a better place through his death, his resurrection, and his power coursing through your life. I want to pray for you as you consider what it is you might want to trade for. And then I'll ask us to stand and go to these tables. Heavenly Father, thank you for each and every person within the sound of my voice, God. I pray right now that one of these words, grace, peace, rest, healing, will have resonance in their hearts and in their minds. God, that the gifts of Jesus through his birth, his life, his teaching, his death, his resurrection might be for them this morning. And that hope of a new journey or a new way of entering into this next week would be fulfilled this morning, started this morning, because of a willingness to step away from the seat that they're in, to trade a card that they've been handed for something that they need. It's in Jesus' name we ask these things. Amen. I'm going to ask you to stand where you are, to consider what you might need. And whenever you're ready, I'm going to ask you to use one of these center aisles to walk either forward or back. If you're closer to the back, go to the back tables. Closer to the front, come to the front. And then maybe use the side aisles to get back to your seat. We're just going to spend a few moments offering an invitation for you to come grab whatever it is you need. And then I'll come back and pray for us and we'll worship together.
Hey there, if you're joining us on eChurch, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube, or you're listening to this on a podcast, we wanted a way for you guys to participate as well. So these ideas, right, of grace and rest and peace and healing, I'd love for you to think in your minds like what it is that you need today. And if you need grace, maybe right where you are, maybe you're in your kitchen, maybe you're in a room in the house, maybe you're listening to this, maybe just take a moment, maybe even consider like putting your hands palm up to receive something from God. So if you need grace, I just want to read you a passage from Hebrews, and my prayer is that you receive it this morning. Hebrews 4:16 says, "Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." If if you need grace, if you need God to inject himself in a part of your life that you can't fix, my hope is that you will come to God and receive the grace of Jesus. Perhaps what you need is rest. You're just worn out. And if that's you, I would invite you to maybe extend your hands and to hear the words of Jesus in Matthew 11:28-30 as he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." If you need rest, then the refreshment of Jesus is for you today. Perhaps what you need is peace. And if what you need is peace, I would love for you to extend your hands and to listen to the words of John 14:27. We read this. Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Now, if you've been wrestling with anxiety, stress, please know that the peace of Jesus is for you today. And for those of you who feel like what you really need is some healing in your life, maybe it's physical healing, maybe it instead is spiritual healing or an emotional healing, my hope is that you'll be able to maybe extend your hands as if you're receiving a gift from God and just hear the words written in 1 Peter 2:24 today. Peter writes, "He himself, Jesus, bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed." If you're looking for healing, and the healing of Jesus is for you. Perhaps that's physical healing in the here and now. Perhaps that's an eternal healing that happens on the other side of heaven. But my hope is that you will receive healing today. If you would like some prayer, our team would love to be praying for you. And if you're watching this on eChurch, you can click on the prayer or you can go to the next step. There's also inlandhills.com/next is a website page that you can go to that'll just let you know what it is that you can do if you're looking to take a further step in your faith or to take a next step with Jesus after knowing that his grace, his peace, his rest, his healing is for you. We are praying for you today. We're going to go back inside now into the auditorium as our folks are changing out their cards.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for your grace. We thank you for your rest, your peace, your healing. And my prayer is for each person who came forward today and exchanged the card they were handed for what they needed. I pray that today is a memorable day where they recognize that you offer more for us than we could possibly hope for. Thank you for a Jesus who was willing to transfer the resentment of the crowd towards Zacchaeus to himself. Thank you for a Jesus who's willing to transfer our sin, our brokenness to himself, that we might be saved, healed, refreshed, that we might find peace, that we might be healed. It's in Jesus' name we ask you these things. Amen. I'm going to ask you to stand together with me, and I'm going to ask us to let's give a shout of praise to God. And we're going to close in a song of worship, and I would love for you to stick around and worship with us as we sing together today. I'm going to have Emily come and lead us.